Welcome to MedMen. This is Andy.
And that is Pin.
And I think what we're going to talk about in this episode is MEDDICC applied to open source.
Yeah.
Selling with an open source solution to your customers. And so for me, like the biggest thing there to begin with is how you overcome the delta between like, hey, what is effectively a free solution and now having to pay for that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely right. And I think the thing here is we see this time and time again. Salespeople are like, okay, well, the customer's already using the solution. Mm-hmm. They're invested in it. And we need to just get in front of them and show them why they need our premium version of it, why they need our, it comes in many forms, of course. It's like extra levels of service, support, mm-hmm. or actual solutions that kind of build around the outside to get more value from the open source solution itself.
Yeah. The default is just like demo, get in there, show why it's great.
Show why we're better.
Yeah.
Like you already love it, but we can make it even better.
Yeah. And if it's free, like you might start here in the organization, right? And if you then stay there.
Yeah, that's the thing, because typically those that you engage with in that nature are the ones that are using it. And we have a name for them. They're called users. And we spend a lot of time in sales avoiding engaging with users. But in an open source engagement, often it's the users you have to involve with. So for me, the real key here is you have to stop, slow down. And it may not feel like the right thing to do because you can see the users and you can see the quick win right in front of you.
Yeah, because that might be going great.
Yeah, it could well be. And that is also not necessarily the best thing, because if it's going great, then where's the pain?
Yeah,
right. So the trick is stop, slow down, zoom out. You've got to be thinking about the value pyramid, which of course we know starts at the very top with goals. We need to really stop and think, what is this organization's goals? What are they existing to achieve? What is their purpose? And then once we start to understand that, we can zoom into their strategies. What are the strategies that they are deploying to try and achieve those goals? And inside of those strategies, which you can find, as we know, in all sorts of places in the public, in annual reports, in press, or just by talking to people within the organization who we should have at least a slight door open to engage with, start to understand what those strategies are and what are the initiatives that they have to support those strategies. Now we can start to really get into understanding day to day, what are the things that are going on, and try and find things that our solution can help them to do. By nature, if they're using the open source platform, then it should be helping towards an initiative. We need to connect those dots to the initiative to find out, well, what's the bigger picture? What is the strategy that initiative is supporting, so that we can then start to figure out how our solution can further help towards that initiative, further help supporting that strategy, which obviously helps them achieve that goal faster. And so sometimes it could just be about looking at the value that strategy is unlocking and trying to attach ourselves to that. But often what you'll find is that open source by nature, it's going to have some obstacles that are, slowing the customer down. It comes back to those value drivers is, may not be accruing as much revenue as they can. There may be an inefficiency side of things. There could even be risk, particularly if it's open source and there may be a lack of development. There may be a lack of support or something like that. So it's about finding what those obstacles are and then aligning your solution with the decision criteria to the needs that you need to unlock those obstacles. So it's actually, not really about talking about the open source platform at all to start with. You really got to go higher up, get zoomed out, think about the business, and then start zooming back in from there.
Because as you were going through these levels, for me, like if you really understand that, you start to understand what the pain is important enough to solve for at levels of the organization that you previously didn't have access to. Like if it's not a customer that is using the free version of your solution, of your open source solution to begin with, like you don't have that with the levels, but equally, like in both of those situations, you want to make sure that you understand what's going on there so that, to your point, you can tie yourselves to the initiatives that are going to take an attempt at solving for those things, right?
Yeah, exactly right. And if you think about the different levels of stakeholder involved in a project that you should create here, the users are going to have a very different set of decision criteria to those that are actually going to be involved in making the decision, at least making the decision about the type of solution that you'd want to sell. Of course, there might be some land and expand plays here and all that kind of good stuff. But if we're really thinking about the bigger picture, we should be focusing towards the top to begin with, at the very least. one of the things I think is interesting is that, I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet about product-led growth, about how I feel it's a marketing motion.
Right.
And what we see so often is people try and sort of label it with some sort of sales sort of label. It's not for me. It's really just marketing. There's not actually that much different in a lot of ways between open source, if we were to sort of zoom out a little bit, and product-led growth motions. Really what we're saying is somebody is using a solution and we're not gaining the amount of opportunity we think we could from them if we were to actually have the opportunity to sit in front of them and say, hey, I'm glad you like this. I'm glad you're getting value, but look at, if you were to partner properly with us, look at all the value you could get from us. And so for me, that there's a real interest sort of overlap between product-led growth motions and open source motions. And really thinking about, if you think about some of the greatest organizations in our industry at the moment, like the Datadogs, the Snowflakes, they have these kind of PLG motions, and I think we can learn a lot from how they approach those motions and how their salespeople may be engaging with the users, but that's certainly not where they're getting the most success. They're that's going on, and then they're going higher up, and they're trying to highlight all the value that could be achieved by unlocking users to do more via their solution. In this case, via an enterprise implementation, rather than just going from like a free version to, being used more. In the open source side of things, of course, it's about actually maybe partnering with the organization you stand for in the first instance.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think like that's actually a bit of product-led pipeline growth. Yeah. Right. So it's
And I think it's important once we've got this view to take it back to MEDDIC, and of course start to think about, okay, so now what is the pain that exists if we don't unlock this obstacle? What is the pain that exists if they can't achieve that initiative? How does that impact the organization from a strategic perspective? And that's trying to get that view, and then start to think about, okay, what value could be provided if we were able to solve for that in the metrics. Of course, making sure that we really are clear with the decision criteria so they understand what it is that they get from our solution that the open source platform doesn't provide, and making sure we take into account the economic buyer's interest in the decision criteria as well.
And not forgetting about the process elements too, right?
Yeah. You've got the process there, of course, as well, which is, this is one of the coolest parts about selling. This is for me, if we think about sports, there's games that sports people will play day in, day out, matches they're playing day in, day out. But for me, the final, the World Cup final, the singles final, is when you as a salesperson have engaged with a prospective customer and there was no former opportunity. You are the one that has created that opportunity because you look from the outside in and said, hey, I can bring value to this organization. They don't know it yet. That for me is as good as selling gets. That's the one that, that in our industry, if you're passionate about what we do, that's the one that's the most exciting. So, having that situation from a decision process perspective where we start with, how do we get this to even be considered, not evaluated? How do we even get this customer to consider going from using a solution they're paying nothing for and they're very happy with to considering partnering with a vendor like us, to evaluating through to close, and everything that comes beyond that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, obviously MEDDPICC being open source, we're close to this, but at the same time, I feel like a lot of the businesses that we get to interact with that do open source too, at the beginning they wonder like, hey, is this for us being open source? And I think the biggest point for me in this conversation today is like, as you touched upon value stakeholders and process in different ways, like, it's probably, as relevant as for anyone, given that in open source, you still need professional selling. This is what underpins it, right? So I think, the answer to that question in capital letters is yes with an exclamation mark any day of the week.
Love that. Cheers, Ben.
All right. Cheers.